This is the Ross Report.
The allegations in that piece of paper are false. And so I'm here to tell your listening audience that they should not take what's face value in the New York Times as true, the same way that they shouldn't take it when the New York Times is attacking our president, Donald Trump.
Nice try. Welcome to the Ross Report, everyone. This is Carol Ross. So good to have you with us today. If you heard the interview yesterday, that was just sort of an encapsulation of Mr. Davis's response to the article in the New York Times by Katie Benner and Erica Green. We have Miss Benner and Miss Green on the line with us today. They have been very gracious in agreeing to come on the show and talk about the serious issue at TM Landry. We want to drill down into all of the issues, and that was a nice try by Mr. Davis to try to equate what some of the national media does to our president with unnamed sources and leaks and that sort of thing, and try to equate it with a story that was well-sourced. These children came on video and gave their stories. So it's quite a different thing. Katie Benner, Erica Green, thanks so much for being with us on the Ross Report today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I rewatched the half-hour program, which launched the new New York Times program on FX, The Weekly, and I was struck by the real empathy that you both brought to it. But first, I want to let our audience know who you are. Erica, please tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, so I'm Erica Green. I cover federal education policy and national education issues at the New York Times. My background is in education reporting. I'm from Baltimore City, and I covered the Baltimore City school system for 7 years. So I've been at this quite a while now.
Wow, that's quite a training for this. The Baltimore City school system, that must have been quite an assignment.
Yes.
Erica, thanks again for being with us. Katie, your background, you were with the Justice Department reporter?
That's correct. So right now I cover the Justice Department here in Washington, D.C., and previously I've covered the tech industry, and I used to cover Wall Street, and I covered it during the financial crisis. So I sort of come to the story with a really broad background in everything from, fraud, housing fraud, financial fraud, and then sort of a criminal justice and law enforcement background as well.
Right. So you know fraud when you see it. Let me ask you this. You received a tip from a former federal prosecutor. Are you at liberty to reveal that source, or was that someone from Louisiana? Was it someone in D.C.? Can you just give us a little bit of information about that source?
Sure. I can't reveal my sources unless
Understood.
they've given permission, but at the same time, I can say that it was somebody who was not in Washington, D.C., but had heard about the school.
Well, it was hard not to hear about the school with all those viral videos that were posted online. And so you got that tip and you started watching the videos, and where did it go from there?
Well, I think that we had already seen the videos. What was interesting is that Eric and I had independently seen the videos because they'd gone viral and they were such feel-good stories. And we went into the story extremely supportive of the idea of the school. We had already been kind of true believers in the idea that this wonderful school in Louisiana had found a way to show the world that students of any socioeconomic background and any race could achieve this huge dream of going to schools like Stanford, Harvard, Brown, and other top universities. So we went into the story with a really, already with positive feelings about TM Landry.
And when you go ahead, Erica.
This is Erica.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I went and kind of searched my social media feed, and there was a tweet that I had sent in December 2017 of one of the students' videos when, I had no inkling of anything at TM Landry. And I wrote, these videos from this school are what the world needs now. They made me genuinely happy. I covered an urban school district. I am from an urban school district, and they brought me joy, and I was very proud to share them, and I am still proud of those students.
Yes, and I did get that feeling in the video when you said that. You came in with a very positive feeling about what was going on, or what seemed to be going on at TM Landry. When you all first came to Louisiana?
So we received the tip at the very end of October And because I'm not an education reporter, I called Erica immediately, and I discussed with her some of the things that I had heard. And she has such an extraordinary expertise in what a great curriculum looks like and sort of all types of classrooms and teaching methods. She thought it would be smart to go down pretty much immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I was there within 48 hours.
What were some of the things that you had heard from the person? Obviously, was it someone from Louisiana? Can you just tell me that?
Well, I can say it was not somebody from the immediate area.
Okay.
Some of the things that we heard were, one, that I think for me the most concerning thing was the idea that there were inaccuracies on student transcripts. That is something that has been prosecuted before as a federal crime, and so it really set off my radar. And then the other was the treatment of the students, that there was something about it that was making people uneasy. And again, not being an education expert, and also knowing that in different parts of the country corporal punishment exists and not wanting to come to this with judgment, I thought that we should probably just go down and see for ourselves what was happening and talk to people. So Erica got on the plane immediately.
Right, so that was in October of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so the story came out in November. So how much time did you spend down here? It looked like you did quite some in-depth interviews with the students.
Yeah, we spent a total of, half the month. So a couple of weeks. We were there for several days at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very familiar with the Atlanta airport now. Having to go through it, I recognize people at certain food places.
And it's very big.
Yes, it's huge. So yeah, we were down. We were down there for 2 weeks, I would say, solidly,
mm-hmm.
And maybe a couple smaller trips here and there. And I want folks to also know that I was on the phone day in and day out. I mean, I have the phone logs of finishing at 2 a.m. and back on the phone at 6 a.m. It was nonstop. It was a very intense experience, and I mean, we lived and breathed this story
mm-hmm.
for a month because we knew it was so important to get it right and
yeah.
make sure that we were thorough. I mean, we did not take the likelihood that we were going to reveal these things lightly. And, we interviewed and we re-interviewed, and then we called others to corroborate. This was very intense. I'm an education reporter. My job is not to tear schools down. I do not see that as my role. And so...
Did you have a name of someone to contact? Was there a specific, like Nigel Mitchell, or who? Was there a name of a specific student that you wanted to contact to start with, and then it seemed like it just kind of mushroomed from there? It seemed like you were contacted by other students, parents.
I think that in the reporting process, what often happens is when you have one interview, if a person is willing to speak out, especially if they feel that they're whistleblowers, they will give you the names of other people to speak to.
Right.
Or in Nigel's case, somebody said, I think I once heard about this student, but I don't know the details. And so then it's incumbent upon us to go figure them out. Well, who was at the school at that time? So I think that the reporting process is always very organic, and I wouldn't describe this as a process where we were targeting people.
Yeah, any specific person. Right,
yeah.
Exactly.
And in terms of, and for Nigel, it's interesting because, when you're talking to people, especially folks in a community in a tight-knit community,
yes.
as they're telling their stories, they just, name drop people. They're like, and then I saw Nigel, get dragged by his hoodie, and we're talking about something completely unrelated, and then I go back at the end and I say, well, who is Nigel? And then that leads to the next story. Or you're speaking to folks and they say, you should really probably talk to this person who saw this other thing. It just really snowballed.
Kind of snowballed from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to have to take a break, but we're going to be right back with Erica Green and Katie Benner, who both did some great investigative work, actually went on the record and got a lot of young people to open up, even at great risk to themselves. We'll talk about all this coming up on the Ross Report. We're back with Katie Benner and Erica Green talking about a really serious subject, the situation at TM Landry College Prep. When you all came down and you first went to the school, did the Landrys welcome you into the school?
We had already had a very long phone conversation with Mike Landry before we came down. So, we had sent him multiple emails explaining that we had heard very concerning things about the school, and we wanted to talk to him. We were always extremely straightforward in our communications about what we'd heard, and we wanted to give him a fair chance to explain what had gone on from his point of view.
Right.
So we'd had a very long phone conversation, and then decided we wanted to follow up again in person. We asked him if we could video him, and we also had serious questions about some of the abuse allegations, one of which he told us about, which we had not yet even uncovered.
Well, I noticed that in one of those phone calls you were shocked when he mentioned that previous allegation or the situation in 2012. You didn't even know about that one, did you?
We did not know, but he told us about it,
Wow.
which allowed us to find the public record. So then we went down, and, he did welcome us into the school, but what we thought was curious was that he would not sit with us alone. He would only speak with us when surrounded by students.
Wow.
Which is fascinating to me as an education reporter, because usually it is, especially since we had already spoken to him about, the very specific concerns that we were going to address in the story. My experience is that when I go to have adult conversations, educators do not shield themselves with children. So, it was very surprising. He directed many of our questions to the students themselves.
And that was the first time you came down also? Because I remember I saw that in the second time you came down, right? You wanted to give him opportunities to answer, but the first time you went down, he had students around him as well?
Oh, no. The first time we went down, no. We first had a phone conversation with him.
Right.
And that did not give him the opportunity to address every single thing. Actually, it gave him the opportunity. He just didn't address everything.
Right.
So we definitely asked him if we could have an in-person conversation. And the second time we came down is when he allowed us into the school.
Yeah. Well, but the first time you came down, that's when you spoke to the students like Bryson Sasso.
That's when we spoke to a range of families.
Right. You sure did. I mean, there were quite a number of students that you spoke to, which gave it even more credence, I thought.
Absolutely.
The fact that there were so many.
Yeah,
there were so many of them. And that this was the thing I think that surprised all of us, and I wonder if it surprised you as well, that there's no real curriculum, there are no certified teachers, and nobody's looking at them because they don't get any federal or state money. I mean, I found that shocking that a school like this that has children's education entrusted to them can fly under the radar so much that no one even knows really what they're up to until two intrepid reporters. And by the way, a lot of people were wondering how, I know you got the tip, but I mean, it was just amazing that two reporters from the New York Times took their time to come down here with two very different areas of interest, one education and the other one Department of Justice. It was pretty amazing.
Well, thanks. I mean, it is an education and justice story, and it was an education and justice story. So I think we were well suited. And I will just say that, my education reporting takes me across the country. A month after that, I published a story about, schools on an Indian reservation in Montana.
Oh.
I go across the country, and we didn't choose Louisiana, but students and families wanted to be heard, and that is our job. And I just want to also say that, we were also surprised by the lack of regulation in Louisiana when we called around asking, who was accountable for this.
Correct.
Ultimately.
Ultimately, apparently, it's just the parents. And the parents.
Yeah, exactly. Every institution said it's the parents. And let's remember that it was parents who chose to stand up and speak out about this, and their children were brave enough to do it as well. And they told us everything. There were no surprises. And that is just very, very rare, especially for parents who have something to lose, students who have something to lose, to risk everything, to put their names to allegations, stand behind them, provide documentation, take responsibility for their roles to some extent. I can just tell you as a longtime education reporter that you just don't see it.
Well, I think that they were so frustrated that they apparently did not get the attention to some of the abuse allegations that they felt was warranted. They did not get that attention and felt very frustrated about this, especially the Mitchells, Nigel and Sinai and their mom. You know, it looked like they felt, when the story finally aired, they felt vindicated somewhat by the story being aired. Now, Raymond Smith Jr. was he was an older, apparently, one of the older students, and he seemed to be sort of, I don't know, I just got a very sad feeling from him that he expected this kind of, sham and fraud, and said it was, and I think he encapsulated what a lot of people felt, that these children, and you said it also, Erica, these children can achieve. They didn't need to have fraud committed on their behalf in their admissions letters, etc.
Well, that's one of the things I found so interesting about Mr. Davis's comments yesterday. First of all respect to Mr. Davis. He's obviously extremely passionate about this issue and passionate about the school, and I deeply respect that. I did find curious that he described the students that TM Landry attracts as these turnaround stories, as kids who are struggling or kids who really need a lot of discipline and they need to be kind of whipped into shape so they can achieve extraordinary things like going to these top universities. But to your point, Raymond Smith is such a great example. He is incredibly smart, and like many students who did achieve at TM Landry and did go on to great schools, he did not come in as a young student who needed to be whipped into shape. He actually transferred in his high school years after having achieved a great foundation in another school and continued to do well, which does kind of show that a lot of these students, especially those who are transferring from some private schools in their in their sophomore and junior years, would have probably done just as fine anywhere else.
Exactly. We have a call coming in right now. I want to take this phone call. Merrill? Is Morel? Morel. Morel has a child who goes to TM Landry. Morel, you're on the line with Katie Benner and Erica Green. Go ahead.
All right. I appreciate them calling into your program, and I would simply like to add my experience with TM Landry. My grandson, who is white, has been going there for 2 years now. He and a friend of his went in the 8th grade. My experience is that he is receiving a superb education. And just as your guest stated forth their resume, I say this from the standpoint of one who was a National Merit Scholar, graduated with BA in history, a minor in physics, and have a law degree. So I know what a good education looks like. And when my grandson is studying Chinese and Latin in the 8th grade, it's marvelous. It's just marvelous. There was a disgruntled group of parents who did not like the fact that they were admitting a bunch of white kids to the school. And I think that was the source of most of the problems. Those who have left now, my grandson tells me that it's a much, much more pleasant atmosphere, and he feels much more welcomed now. And the other comment that I've got is that with regard to Mike Landry meeting with a bunch of students around with the reporter, is that they do this with every sort of disciplinary action or student policy or whatever. They never do anything by themselves. Landry and sometimes one of the two of the other instructors always have some students around to participate in and add their input into the decision. So anyway.
Okay, Meryl. That's your experience. Okay. Thank you so much for that comment. Oh, we have one more. Burley, go ahead. You're on the Ross Report with Katie Benner and Erica Green.
Hey, Carol.
Sure. Hey.
I just want to make a quick positive comment. I don't know much about the goings-on inside the school, of course, besides what we've read from their reporting. But I did have personal experiences with a lot of the students from TM Landry, specifically with our FoodNet food drives. For several years, the kids participated and helped. And I always made it a point. I visited with them when they were there. We had some fantastic conversations. These kids were so well behaved, so gracious and just so enthusiastic about their path in life and what they were doing. And I can't help but just feel that they've been wronged in whatever, because to your point just a minute ago, I don't see these kids having needed anybody
doing anything fraudulent for them.
Any fraudulent.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
if they did, I can't imagine that these kids were in on it. Yeah. I just
oh,
couldn't.
no. No, Burley, I don't think any of us got that from the story, that the kids were in on it. No.
I know. I just, but positivity needs to reign here for those kids, because, like I said, right. they were gracious, and they were just very, very well mannered, right. and they were just a joy to be around.
Well, thanks for that comment, Burley. I know their parents probably appreciate that very much. All right, Erica and Katie. So you've heard those comments, and there are a lot of folks who have stepped in to defend T.M. Landry. But we get back to the phrase that keeps going through my head is the soft bigotry of low expectations. Why did they feel, with all the college admissions scandals going on now, this sort of plays right into that, and it doesn't help. And as Erica, as you said many times in the program, which I recommend to anybody, if they haven't seen it, go online and check it out, the weekly on FX. You said many times that it disturbed you to think that anything you might write would in any way negatively impact these children's future.
Yes. I mean, that was very difficult for me. I am, also a Black woman. And it was very difficult for me to think about giving people another reason to doubt the abilities of Black children. And that was also, for parents in the community, they were also very pained by the fact that they really believed in a Black couple to
yes.
educate their children.
Yes.
I mean, that, those are real. I know it's uncomfortable, but that was a real sentiment. And, at the end of the day, the parents were not just disturbed about the abuse allegations. I mean, the first kind of red flags about T.M. Landry came from a parent who was very concerned about the lack of progress that his child had made after several years. They value education. Yes, they wanted their children to go to the best schools, but they also wanted them to be learning and engaged and making progress, and that was a real concern too. And it was again, we reviewed independent test scores of several students, showing us that they were several grade levels behind.
Oh, really?
So,
now that didn't come out too much in the program. You did oh my.
Yeah, we had a lot to cover. We covered as much as we could, but there was much left unsaid even in the story. So and with I really want to address this idea that this was just a disgruntled group of parents.
Yes, I wish you would, because it didn't come across that way.
No, that is not true. Originally, we were, the Landrys told us before the story had even published, and has continued to tell the community, that this was just three teachers who wanted to go start their own school. We interviewed nearly 50 people, Yikes. Reviewed dozens and dozens of paperwork for the first story. After the story came out, we got scores of calls from other people unrelated to these families who had no vested interest in T.M. Landry, but who knew what was happening at that school. They corroborated what we printed. They continued to call us. I mean, this is not, I don't even want to enumerate how many sources
right.
we're up to now,
right.
but to think that we just hinged a story like this, of this importance, on just a few disgruntled parents is infuriating, and it's disrespectful to parents who care about their children's education.
And I don't think that the teachers who the Landrys have said are behind the story, I don't think we've ever even quoted them. Like, I don't think they've ever even been in an
No, in fact, I didn't know anything about the three teachers. This is the first time I'm hearing of that. That wasn't in the program, nor was the fact that you interviewed nearly 50 people. That was pretty Incredible.
Yeah, that was in the print story.
Yeah, it was in the print story.
Right, exactly. But that was not on the video. All right, we'll be right back with Katie Benner and Erica Green, the New York Times reporters who broke the story about TM Landry College Prep. We shall return. 232-1542 if you want to get in on the conversation. Love to hear from you. So you're saying that all those kids that they interviewed in this story that was on TV on Sunday night were lying about the fact that they've had to kneel for hours?
What I am telling you is that the New York Times did not include in their story a far greater number of students and parents who contradicted those allegations. They did not include those testimonies in their story.
That was part of the interview yesterday, Katie and Erica, and he was very disturbed when you went back and you were going to give them an opportunity to speak. And by the way, I have to credit your editor, too, for allowing you to do that, because there were so many questions that still had to be answered. So he allowed you to come back down to give them another opportunity, and it turns out didn't work out so well, did it?
No, and this is also one of the difficulties of reporting, and I think that a lot of people find this in their work. Attorneys find this in their work. You will conduct dozens of interviews, and you will always find people who are in disagreement. But what you are really looking for is, what does the preponderance of evidence say, rather than the outliers. So I totally understand and respect Mr. Davis's point of view, but for us, after all those conversations, we actually did have far more conversations with folks who had the experiences that we wrote about that they found disturbing. And also some of the students in the room who, while Mr. Landry was standing there, raised their hands and had nice things to say about the school. After they reached out to us, and they said that they had a very different experience from the one that they were willing to share while seated in front of him. So we had to take that into account as well.
I have a caller calling in. Paulette, hold on just a second. But I tell you, that's what struck me when the camera lingered on those students and they were just looking at him like deer in the headlights, like they were not going to express anything. Did you get that feeling too? It was like looking at him when he was doing the megalomaniac Jesus thing with the arms out. That just,
I watched the students a lot more than I watched him.
Yes, it looked like they were just stunned.
We all were.
Okay. Oh, whoa. That was uncomfortable. Paulette, go ahead. You're on the Ross Report with Katie Benner and Erica Green.
Yes, my question is, I want to see on the interview.
Go ahead, Paulette. Don't listen to your radio. Just listen on the phone.
Okay, I wanted to see both sides of the story, and I only saw the worst part. So when I would do research, I tried not to be biased and show both sides.
Yeah, well, and I think allowing Mr. Davis to come in yesterday was part of our giving both sides.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but the whole thing about this matter is that in true research, when you're being non-biased, you show both sides, the negatives and the positives. And evidently, for it to be in existence that period of time, there must have been some good.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt that there was some good came out of the school. Erica and Katie, you found some of that as well. I mean, there were a couple of students who actually did perform successfully and would have without having their transcripts falsified, correct?
Absolutely. And I do think that we note in our story that the joy that you saw in those videos was very real, that the results, in many ways, he did get students into fantastic schools. And also, I think one of the complicating things about the story is this idea that, yes, there were good things happening there, but at what price? And I don't think that the answer is black and white. I think that it is a far more difficult question to answer in a country where you are seeing people of color and you're seeing people with fewer socioeconomic resources being what feels like systemically blocked from these better opportunities through higher education. Does the end justify the means? If it means changing that situation, that's not an easy question to answer. I don't think anybody would say that that was just a clear yes or no question.
Exactly.
What was very clear is that parents did not want their children being abused. They did not want their lives being presented as in shambles and as, portrayed as drug dealers.
Right. The stereotype.
Dignity compromised to be able to achieve that for their children.
Yeah. Paulette, thank you for calling. Thanks. The stereotype that it played into, that's the worst part of it. That is unconscionable to me, to have a black couple who are very obviously successful. He was, a former salesman, and she was a former nurse. and they fostering this culture of fear and doctoring transcripts. And what Bryson Sasso said was amazing when he said, I didn't do any of that. I mean, I didn't know. He had to change all of his grades. He didn't take Mandarin. He didn't take advanced biology. He had no clue what he was doing when he got to St. John's. He ended up having to cancel all of those classes and take totally new classes, something that he could do and could understand. So I think that is what troubled a lot of people, that they manufactured these stories to make it looks like a from downtrodden culture, and that's what the schools would like to see. Terribly upsetting.
Right. Carol, can I address something that I think is very important?
Absolutely.
Mr. Davis's claims that this story is fake it's really upsetting, not for me and Katie. As reporters, we get allegations like that all the time. It's the fact that he has addressed none of the facts, and the ones that he has grossly misrepresented with a report that he is misrepresenting. We outlined very specific details in this story. Not one of those did Mr. Davis or the Landrys come to us to say, here's proof that is not true. Right. What he's doing is vilifying the Times and not addressing anything based on facts that the families presented. And this report, they have touted a 4-page summary that was compiled by Mr. Davis's close friend, but there is a 23-page report in which the law firm finds discrepancies on transcripts, including grades in classes, the fact that they were making up class rankings, that large portions of recommendations were being used for multiple students. And then the report specifically goes on to say that the Landrys contradicted each other on whether or not they showed these recommendations to families for accuracy.
And the law firm is still continuing. Is it not continuing their investigation? Are they still?
I have no idea. I thought this was the conclusion. It says in the report
that they've divided the work into 2 parts, and that the second part, which specifically addressed the New York Times allegations, they were unable to complete. I don't know if that
is correct.
Going to continue, but they weren't able to complete
that
part of it.
We have just confirmed with the state police that they are definitely, that is not fake news. They are definitely investigating some of the abuse allegations. And of course, Katie, with your sources at the Justice Department, apparently, tell us about that. Do you know the scope of that investigation yet?
We don't know the full scope of the investigation, but we do know that it doesn't overlap, it seems right now, with the state investigation, which is looking at physical abuse at TM Landry. Mm-hmm. Seems like the federal investigators, the Justice Department, the FBI, they are more interested in fraud, which makes sense.
The college application practices, that's a big hot issue right now with all that's been going on, I think everybody's concerned.
We just saw that multi-state, enormous college admissions fraud scandal break wide open earlier this year. It is clearly something the Justice Department as a whole cares very much about, and they do not want to see that sort of thing happening.
Right, and the colleges and universities need to get more active on their side as well, and not just look at the dollar signs in the cases of the wealthy families. We have a couple of questions coming in, and I know we're going to be hitting a break soon. Christine, go ahead. You're on the Ross Report with Katie and Erica.
Okay, my question is not specifically about T.M. Landry, but being in the public school system and having been a teacher for more than 20 years, I wonder how these reporters and other people would compare and contrast the falsification of records in T.M. Landry and other schools that they may have investigated with children who go through public school for years and years and come out with a high school diploma who truly have not been taught to read, which is just
well, that's a scandal of the school system.
Injustice.
Yes, it is an injustice, Christine, and it's a scandal of school systems all over the country. You know that, and
Absolutely.
I know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
absolutely. I've covered that too.
And that's a systemic problem. We're talking about a specific issue here where there's no real oversight. Raymond, go ahead. You're on the Ross Report. Welcome.
Hey, Carol. How are you?
Doing great. How about you?
I'm an avid listener.
Thank you.
you spoke about the interview with my son, Raymond Jr. I don't have a lot to say other than thank you for bringing this issue to light.
Yes.
My children are very proficient, science, technology, engineering, and math. Me and Mom are estranged, but we are the best co-parenting couple in the world.
There you go. And that is
These
crucial. Would you not agree, Raymond? That is a crucial
Yes,
component.
Ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And we do not look for the proverbial handout,
Nope.
My boys live on merit. We have taught them very well. Out of 5
yes,
children,
you have.
4 college students.
I think Katie and Erica are very fond of your son.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you
for calling.
Hey, he's
Oh, my goodness.
Man.
By the way, we've never spoken to Mr. Raymond Sr. before, so.
This is a
No,
first. Well, I'm glad we could
do this, but
I'm glad we could bring you together on the
today.
Ross Report, Raymond. Thanks so much.
Well,
go ahead. Oh, we lost Raymond. I'm so sorry. Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Oh my
That was
God!
amazing.
Oh my God!
Well, there you have it.
Yes.
Wow.
And that was the thing that disturbed me so much about Mr. Davis's interview yesterday, that he kept saying that it was poverty, it was this, it was that, and never really acknowledged that a big part of the issue is parental involvement. And it's obvious from the parents that you interviewed that they were more than involved. They wanted their children to succeed. They were so invested in this and were so disappointed when
They were so invested that they were willing to spend tremendous amounts of money to send their children to TM Landry. As Mr. Davis said yesterday, they do not have a scholarship program at TM Landry, so people were paying out of pocket hundreds of dollars per student per month, including some parents we spoke with who had to file for personal bankruptcy to send their children to this school because they wanted the best for them that much. And I think that that's another thing that we noticed in the interview yesterday. Mr. Davis was certainly very passionate, and he talked about how important this work was, and we agree that this work of educating children is extremely important. He also mentioned that TM Landry was now a nonprofit, which makes sense because they took about $250,000 in donations last year. But we don't know what has happened to that money. We know that there were never any scholarships. The Landrys themselves and Mr. Davis has said as much. And, the nonprofit itself is not in good standing. So based on public record searches that we've done recently, perhaps our information is old, but I did a search just last week.
with Charity Navigator?
Yes, that the nonprofit itself is not in good standing because it has not yet filed its annual report with its finances.
Well.
So we are looking forward to when they do file, get back in good standing, and we can take a look get a little bit of a look at what's going on financially with TM Landry. I think that's an interesting topic as well.
Well, Mr. Raymond is back. Raymond, go ahead. Sorry, we lost you. I don't know what
Carol.
happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
we lost you, babe. Anyway, I've never noticed any allegations. Well, it wasn't brought forward to me. Okay, we teach our sons to be independent in their thinking and their actions, right? So when they come to us, we listen to our children. We listen very well.
Mm-hmm.
One problem I did have was with the tuition. Initially, it was at one price, and then exponentially, it went up and went up and went up and went up. Before you know it, you're behind the 8 ball, and you're wondering, where's it going? I know I'm paying this. So I talked to Mom, and she's like, Raymond, I know you paid it. So there was a question with the finances.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know about the allegations of physical abuse, but I do know there was a question about the finances. So now Raymond is a spokesperson, and I would hope that the media treats him fairly because he has no reason to lie, Carol.
Yes, exactly. And he's got no axe to grind. It was very obvious
No axe to
he was
grind.
sincere. Yes.
They
yes.
move on their own merit, Mom, and we made that a point.
Great. Raymond, thank you so
These
much.
are great kids. Thank you, Carol, for taking my call.
You're very welcome. Thank you for calling. Kent, go ahead. You're on the Ross Report. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Karen, for taking my call.
Sure.
I called in yesterday. Mr. Davis, I have lost respect for the gentleman. First of all, the first caller that you had called in when he was a guest, the first caller said the reason why great power wants it to fail. Okay? Number two, toward the end of the program, instead of Mr. Davis, how many people called in that were former teachers, retired teachers, as myself with tons of relatives in the school system? We all basically said the same thing. The failing schools on the north end of town is
parents are not involved? How many people? And every time one of the callers brought it up, Mr. Davis would shoot it down. We cannot all be wrong and Mr. Davis right. Well, and then toward the end of the program, he made the comment, which I knew it was going to come sooner or later. I figured he would bring it up. The reason why the schools on the north end are not good because of racism. You know what, Mr. Davis? I live in Lafayette Parish. I'm born and raised here, and I resent you saying the reason why the schools on the north end are because of racism. I resent that, and I have no respect for the gentleman. None.
Well, we appreciate your call, Kent. You're obviously just as passionate on your side. We're coming to the end of the hour. I don't know if you have time to stay through. If you do, we could do another segment after the top of the hour, because obviously people are really engaged in this. But I understand if you've given me more time than I thought I would have already. But if you do have to go, one final question. How do you plan to stay on top of this story? Will you continue to keep up with the FBI, the Justice Department, the state police? Will you keep us informed? And we are doing that on this end as well. But Katie, I know you may have some sources that maybe I don't have, and maybe
I think that we'll, of course, we will continue to report out on the investigations. But I think that the best reporting on what is happening minute to minute in your community is going to come out of your local reporters. Some of them have done fabulous jobs.
Yes.
I know Ben Myers over at the Advocate has been doing a great job covering this story. So certainly what's going on in the school day to day will be local reporting. But we have some investigations.
We have some very good reporters. So did we move the news?
We are not going anywhere.
Okay.
We will definitely.
I really do want to say we do have a little more time about the fact. I mean, people really need to read the article and see how many people you did interview, and some of the things that Mr. Landry actually admitted to. That he hit the students, that he could be rough. Oh, I yell a lot. And this was the part that worried me and that troubled me. He goads black and white students to compete against one another because that is how the real world works. Well, that is true. But we don't need to falsify records on either side because they're all talented in their own way and with the right backing and the right education. And I agree. I think the one thing that the Landrys do have is that discipline. And obviously the parents back them up with the discipline, but can the discipline, it seems to me, has gone too far. And we see that in public schools. Maybe there's not enough discipline in the public schools, but maybe they went too far in order to prove a point on their side.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We so appreciate the opportunity, and we respect all the work that you do, and we have really enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you both very much.
I would be happy to come back on.
All right. Good deal. Well, as we get more information on this story, we'd love to have you both on.
Okay, always.
Thank you.
Just let us know.
Great. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Katie Benner, Erica Green with the New York Times, the story about TM Landry College Prep.